taking you inside the conversations that shape our mental health. From stress, relationships, and parenting to workplace balance, youth challenges, and mental disorders. Every Wednesday from 10 to 11 a.m., Dr. Gilliard brings expert insights, real stories, and practical tools you can use. Tune in starting Wednesday, September 10th, 2025 for Mind Matters on Rev-Up Radio. Because at Rev-Up 95.9 FM, your mind matters.
It's now time for Mind Matters, hosted by Dr. Julius Gilliard. Dr. Gilliard, a very warm welcome to you
and thank
and
you.
Your guest.
Thank you, Andre. Welcome back, listeners, to Mind Matters. I am Dr. Julius Gilliard, and today we're exploring drug use and mental health. This is a topic that touches families, touches communities, and in fact touches our entire nation. If you remember, in our first episode, we touched on suicide prevention. And today we go deeper into another aspect of mental health, which is the complex relationship between drug use and our mental well-being. So just a little preamble that research does show that mental health and substance use are closely linked. Sometimes people turn to drugs to cope with their mental health issues, depression, anxiety, even trauma. And other times drug use itself leads to worsening mental health problems. With me today is Dr. Marcus Day. He doesn't like me to call him Dr. Day. I call him the humble lion. So he's a public health leader and advocate for evidence-based drug policy in St. Lucia especially and the wider Caribbean. He's done lots of work. I didn't realize he was such a wealth of expertise right under my nose. I know him from Turning Point. I guess most of the listeners know him from Turning Point, and where he worked for many years. But from what I see from his resume, he's been a real advocate for drug policy and drug reform in St. Lucia and the wider Caribbean. So welcome, Dr. Day.
Thank you, Dr. Gillard.
Yes. So could you start by telling us what inspired you to dedicate your life, as it is, to this area of work?
Okay. Well, so I'm a boomer, right? And I came of age in 1968, and I was a long-haired hippie. And so drugs were everywhere. And when I went to university, drugs were everywhere. And unlike President Clinton, I did inhale. And so that's how I started in the work, basically. And then you weren't expecting this, were you? And
No.
In 1984, I decided that, and especially in 1984, that I had a drug problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to go to Narcotics Anonymous. And so I did years and years. I have all kinds of chips. But I also realized at that point that there were a number of people who had, well, one of the things I saw were people who cycled in and out through the 12-step program, mm-hmm. and had relapses. And the program did not manage that well. And so where I could see where maybe 10-12% of the people who were on, you have to manage me, otherwise I will talk for the whole hour.
I know.
No, but I noticed that there must be other interventions besides a 12-step program, besides a residential rehabilitation program. And so anyway, I came here, I got married in 87, I came to St. Lucia, and I worked in education for a while. I was the vice principal of Sir Ira Simmons, I was the principal of Tapion School, and I was doing a lot of work with community groups, the Crisis Center, CARE, these different groups that worked with vulnerable people, whether it was women, whether it was young people. And the UN Office of Drugs and Crime, the guy who worked in Barbados, sent somebody here. I was a Rotarian. The person sat next to me at Rotary. She worked at the UN Office of Drugs and Crime. She was telling me about a project they did here. and I ended up meeting a man named Benignus Henry. We all remember Benignus Henry. I would like to give him a shout out. And I got involved with them. And Natasha Lloyd, who is still at the Ministry of Health, was there, Elizabeth Serrier. And so, because of my work in education and also my background, my younger background in substances, I just basically started to get involved in that and realized that evidence was the way to change policy.
This is something I believe strongly, that we don't have enough evidence for a lot of mental health issues. So I'm glad that you have the same view as I do. As we move forward, talking about evidence, what I want to do is to put forward some data. If we look at the research around drug use around the world, and especially in the Caribbean, what we're going to see is that alcohol dependence is right at the top. So alcohol dependence is the most common substance use disorder, with over 100 million people using alcohol daily around the world. Yes. Second to that is cannabis. Well, they call it cannabis dependence, but I no longer believe in that nonsense, as I call it. I have 22.1 million people worldwide. Then opioid dependence, 26.8 is actually more than cannabis. So you could say worldwide about 6% of young people, age 15 to 64, use illicit drugs. And that does not include alcohol. So the illicit drugs are the crack cocaine, the molly, and all of these other drugs. The snorted cocaine, well, in some countries, cannabis. Yeah. Now, of that 6%, usually about 10 to 15% develop dependence. So not everybody who uses a substance is dependent on it, and we have to look at the difference in those terminologies. So we have two psychiatry bodies around the world. We have the DSM-5, which is the American model, and we have the ICD, which is the European model. And although the ICD-11 now is closer to the DSM-5, but previously the DSM-5 had substance use disorders. And what that did, it had 11 criteria grouped into 4 categories. So one category was impaired control, so the person never thought that they would lose control of their use, but they do. Social impairment, the person's social responsibilities start to fail, or the person has relationship problems. Risky use, so the person uses in risky situations, or the person has another disorder that the use affects and continues to use. And the pharmacological basis, which is dependence or withdrawal when they stop using the substance. And you have severity levels for the American models, mild, moderate, severe, depending on the number of criteria that the person has. With the European model, the ICD, they used to focus on harmful use and dependence. And with harmful use, it was basically a pattern of substance use that is causing actual damage to health. So the European model focused more on physical and mental health, whereas the American model focused more on like a spectrum of use from mild to severe. Now, those different models in the past, those are current models, but in the past, most of the research that was done used to be on the former models. So I think we need a lot of new research in that area to find out exactly what is going on and how severe this is and how it is affecting our population. If we have to look at Caribbean data, cannabis use is one of those that have been studied most around the Caribbean, especially in Jamaica and Trinidad. Jamaica has more recent data. I think Jamaica has data up to 2023, which shows about, let me see if I can pull it up, that alcohol use in Jamaica, the rate is about 77% of people who've consumed alcohol at some point of their life, so lifetime prevalence. And in the past year, 60%. and in the past month, 46%. So cannabis lifetime in Jamaica is 30%. The past year, 19%. And in with tobacco and there's not much research into that because it's about 30%, and that's across the board. Now, St. Lucia, I don't know how much research has been done. I know Dr. Day at one point did some research around crack cocaine and so on because of his work at Turning Point. I am not sure. I know that the last time we had a PAHO study here, it was like 2010. So that would be a pretty old study, which I didn't want to go into because I think it would be outdated.
Yeah, but if you take the school surveys, right, and you look at the school surveys over a period of time, and you take the OAS funded these school surveys, and you look at the number of people who used any drug, but primarily cannabis and alcohol were the main two, and then you start to extrapolate that, right? These people, when they got out of secondary school, didn't stop, and so how many people? And I estimate that there's probably 25,000 to 30,000 people who use cannabis daily here in St. Lucia.
Mm-hmm.
And I figure that there's probably about $150,000 a day changing hands for that kind of cannabis use.
Mm-hmm.
And that's adults. When I come up with that figure, I figure we have about 105,000 adults since over the age of 18 in St. Lucia. So I leave the underage people out of the mix.
So what it says here is that the school-based survey had prevalence of alcohol is at 86.2% lifetime. The past year 73% and past month 61%. So that's pretty high. Yeah.
Can I ask a question, either to you, Dr. Day, or Dr. Gilead?
Mm-hmm.
Why do humans feel the desire to use drugs?
So that's something that's very interesting. Thanks for asking, Andre. I won't call it a desire. Like I said initially, a lot of persons with mental health issues use drugs to self-medicate, and Dr. Day is pretty common with that because we were speaking about it before the show. Somebody with anxiety, for example, may feel very socially awkward, and in order to feel calmer while they socialize, may start using alcohol. So that may be the innocence of first use. And I know alcohol as what we call a gateway drug. So alcohol use, as it proceeds with time, the use becomes greater, unawares to the person, and it may even be a gateway to other drugs of abuse that may start to really affect the person's the way that they function, both psychologically and socially.
So you're saying that the person who turns to drugs,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's alcohol or marijuana, that they're going through some...
Yes, some persons, not everybody.
Okay.
So those persons may be going through psychological turmoil. Another thing that is...
I think that the drug use exists on a continuum. So I would be more inclined to say that most people who use substances have some psychiatric issue, some mental health issue. I mean, across the board. And I indict my friends who still smoke cannabis, and I tell them all the time. In fact, I told two of them on the phone, I'm going to talk about y'all tomorrow when I'm about how messed up you all are. But I think that, so I think it's a continuum, right? I think that some people, and I think functionality is a big part of it, right? If you can use substances and you function within society, and we know people who drink from morning to night and still do their job and still have the stuff, right? I mean, the physical problems that are going to incur are different from the functionality issues, right? But I think that rather than say gateway, I like to use the term exposure opportunity. That if you're using a substance and your grandmother told you don't hang out with bad people because you're going to be bad like them, right? If you hang around with people who use substances, you will most likely use it. Sorry. People are herd animals, and we do what's in the herd, right? So we follow the herd. We do, we call it peer pressure, but it exists, and I'm sorry. And so I think that the exposure, I think trying to keep people away from other substances. And this has always been the problem with illicit substances, because when you go to buy cannabis from somebody, if that person is also selling crack cocaine, you're more likely to be induced into trying the crack cocaine. Maybe you don't even know it. I mean, some people are smoking crack because they're smoking it into a black joint, a spranger, and they don't even realize that. I remember interviewing one guy who said he went back to the same guy who sold joints for a year before he realized that they had been sprinkled with crack, because he was getting such a good high from that. You know, and like, to me, that kind of message is, if you're going to buy weed loose, roll it yourself. Don't take a joint from somebody else. As a harm reduction, right? Harm reduction is, we try to reduce the harm that people do to themselves through education. And education is not permission, right? We can educate people to use drugs safely without giving them permission.
So Dr. Day, are you saying that there are some people who may have some mental issue, turning to drugs to deal with it, and also the issue of peer pressure? That is another factor in one turning to drugs.
I don't know about whether people pressure.
So let me. So there's something that all human beings have, and that's called communion needs. So all human beings, our one of our basic needs is to come together as a community,
right,
and feed off each other. So that is what is being met by. That's what persons refer to as peer pressure. It's a communion need that we all have, that is being met through our friends who are using and so on. And we want to feel like we fit in and be contributing to that community of persons.
Right. So it may not necessarily be a mental issue that you're going through at that time. Yeah,
it may not. Like I said, not everybody who uses substances does have mental health issues.
Okay.
So some persons use to fit in. Some persons use to feel more comfortable in the group.
So the story we've heard, like, there's some people who probably want to say something to you and wouldn't say it under normal circumstances, but they would take alcohol or some other drug too.
That's because alcohol causes disinhibition. So it causes you to lose, how you call it, your brakes, as the people say it. And so the persons become bolder, they become a lot more talkative and so on, a lot more sociable, because I'm sure you know persons who, when they drink, become very jovial and happy and so on.
That's true.
That is true, because of the effect the alcohol has on the brain. Now, one of the things Dr. Day says is that he believes that everybody who uses substances does have a mental health issue. Now, we have to look at that carefully, because mental health issues also are on a continuum. I believe that everybody has a mental health issue somehow.
What do you mean by that?
I was going to ask you, Doc, how many people do you think are actually mentally healthy? How many people have you run into?
Especially in the Caribbean. I believe that all of us in the Caribbean are traumatized to some extent because of the kind of childhoods that we were forced to go through. A lot of us have never dealt with that pain that we're carrying around. And a lot of the persons who use substances, they use it to actually help them deal with that pain. And I don't know if you know of the work of Gabor Mate in Canada. And he has a book called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. And that is a very interesting book to read, because it actually does point out a lot of, or give a lot of examples of persons who are carrying around pain, and they actually use the substances to deal with their emotional and other pain that they carry around, that they wouldn't have been able to deal with without those substances. So a lot of times we demonize persons who use substances, but we have never provided them with the support that they really need to deal with the pain, and the substances do that for them.
So can maybe I don't, Dr. Day, because I'm not a fan of alcohol, although I take a little drink once in a while, and I don't use marijuana.
It's good for the soul.
Yes, I don't use marijuana, period. I never used it, right? So I just want to know, can you describe the feeling of being under the influence of marijuana? What is that like?
For me, it basically calms me.
It calms you.
It's a sedative. It calms me down. It just the amount of righteous indignation that I can drum up on any subject and get myself really worked up. And it's an interesting thing, because many people would say, well, you could use yoga, you could do You know, I mean, there's a lot of ways that I guess people can remain calm. There's pharmaceuticals. I mean, a lot of people turn to pharmaceuticals, and so I think that for me, now it's going to be different for other people. I find that one of the things where it says that cannabis makes you lethargic is not necessarily true, at least in the Caribbean, where every construction job that goes on, every bit of labor that goes on is fueled by cannabis. I mean, people are working physically hard and smoking cannabis throughout the day. I see it on jobs all the time. So I think that, you know, it varies for people. I would also like to say that alcohol, whereas it might make you euphoric, it also could possibly make you depressed, right? I mean, people get drunk and cry. I remember my father was an alcoholic, and I mean, I remember him, you know, beating us and then feeling bad about it and crying. I'm a former school teacher and school principal, and I would like to say that in addition to the way we were raised, the sexual abuse that goes on in the household, in the family, is another huge traumatic stress. I had kids would come up to me. I think we need clinical supervision for teachers, because the kind of stuff that I was told as a school teacher when kids would come to me and confide in me their problems, I'd go home and it would like, oh my God, you know, go home to Auntie Pinky and say, Pinky, you won't believe what some of these kids told me today, you know, that kind of stuff.
So Dr. Day, you said it calms you. So are you saying that ordinarily you're not calm? And why does one feel the need to be calm? Well, I don't get it. So
Andre, I don't want to answer for him. What I want to say is to each his own. So everybody has a different need when they use a substance.
Oh, so you're saying that maybe in the case of Dr. Day or somebody else,
so in his case,
it may calm him, it may not calm somebody else.
Yes. So in his case, he may have a restless spirit, like the people say. So he may be a restless person who the cannabis gives him more focus. So it allows him to focus better. It allows him to remain more grounded, you could call it. Whereas somebody else may use it in order to calm down the anger, or in order to prevent themselves from becoming violent and so on. Whereas somebody else may use it to increase their energy so that they can work harder. Or somebody else may use it to become more disinhibited and be able to relate better with people around them. So to each his own. When you speak about what you feel when you smoke, everybody also has a different experience. So his feeling may be of becoming calm. Another person's experience may be that the thoughts become clearer. Another person's experience may be that they feel a heaviness in their body, or another person may feel light or high, as they call it. So everybody has a different experience, and that is because we are all human and we are all unique. There are lots of myths around substance use that I really wanted to touch on, and one of the myths is that persons who use substances have some kind of moral failing, that they are maybe bad people, or that something is wrong with them that they need to use substances. And that is absolutely not true. Yes, all of us have a different way of dealing with our issues. All of us know what we want, and if the substances give the person what they need in that moment without causing issue with their responsibility and their relationships and so on, then yes, those persons use. The difficulties arise when it becomes a disorder, or disordered use. And the disordered use ones are those who are very difficult to deal with, because those persons more or less lose control of the amount that they can use, and it starts to affect them in all kinds of ways, both physically and mentally. So whether it is somebody who already has a mental illness who's using, or somebody who, because of the disorder use, becomes mentally ill, the disordered use does cause significant issues.
Andre, nobody sells sex for cannabis. Nobody's stealing for cannabis. Nobody's breaking into your house and stealing your stuff for cannabis, right? And I think that's one of the differences, right? I also would like to say that cannabis is literally the only euphoriant that actually nourishes your body. And you go look at some of the research around.
When you say nourishes, what do you mean?
Your body is filled with endocannabinoid receptors, both in your brain and in your immunological system, and cannabis feeds that built-in endocannabinoid system that you have in your body, and it's part of every mammal has this built in, and it's fascinating because, like I said, 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, I went to Narcotics Anonymous for cannabis, right? And so if you wanted to talk about a cannabis warrior against cannabis, it would have been me, right? And part of my beginnings in my drug career, my drug prevention career, was being very anti-cannabis. And after '98, when California and British Columbia legalized cannabis and made it, we became able to study it. We became able to study patients rather than criminals, basically. And so we got about 25 good years now of looking at cannabis, looking at what cannabis does to the body, and looking at some of the science that was suppressed because it didn't fit the ideological premise, especially of the United States, especially of NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Abuse. So for me, I would, when people, we're legalizing cannabis in St. Lucia. We're regulating cannabis in St. Lucia right now. The legislation is there. One of these days it'll be passed. And to me, people say, well, what if people use more cannabis? And I'm like, I hope so. I hope people will transit from alcohol use. Because if you look at the Rasta man who smokes cannabis from morning to night and has been doing it for 40 years, and then you look at Rasta who's been drinking alcohol morning to night for the last 40 years and put them next to each other and tell me who's in better shape, right? And it's amazing. I mean, it really is. So I'm not promoting cannabis use, but if you have a substance use disorder, if you're so inclined to pick up an alcohol drink at 8 o'clock, and I've seen this myself in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I used to actually quarrel with these guys like 40 years ago. Oh, you're just smoking weed now, you're not doing anything, it's the same thing. I realized that that's far from true, and that if I can get somebody who smokes crack to only smoke cannabis, if I can get somebody who pipes to smoke cannabis and joints and crack together, even that is a...
Yeah, funny that you're saying that, Dr. Dave.
Just hold your thought, Dr. Gillard. We have to take a little break.
Okay.
This is Mind Matters with Dr. Julius Gillard, and the show brought to you the compliments of Lab Services.
Knowing is the first step. Knowing is confidence. It's a compass guiding you towards medical answers. At Laboratory Services and Consultations Limited, we are in the business of knowing where to look and what to look for. And this knowledge guides you and your health provider to your medical answers. We are the focused, precise, and confidential heart of healthcare, the invisible thread binding together all those committed to your well-being. Laboratory Services and Consultations Limited. We focus on results so you can focus on what's important. Need us? Call us. Telephone 459-2200 or visit any of our 10 locations island-wide.
Welcome back to Mind Matters with Dr. Julius Gillard. Dr. Gillard?
Yes, what I was going to say before we took the break was that there is research around crack and cannabis. So crack use can be lessened through cannabis use. And what happens is that the cannabis, the path from crack to cannabis actually leads to healthier outcomes in the research that I've seen. And the cannabis actually helps maintain the person off crack cocaine. Yeah. So not all drugs are evil and deleterious as we keep saying, and that is a myth that we have. Some do benefit, especially persons who have disordered use in the more damaging drugs like alcohol, like Dr. Day was saying, and crack cocaine.
You know, the other thing, Andre, I think that's really important, and it's fascinating. We don't have any other drugs here. I mean, occasionally tourists. Anybody who used any other drugs in any other survey that I ever did came up to them with either they lived overseas and they got exposed there, or they were tourists. We have cannabis and we have cocaine, and our cocaine is very high quality cocaine, right? It comes right from Venezuela. It's 90% pure, and in fact, our crack is desirable in Martinique, because in Martinique they cut the cocaine down to 40% or something like that. But because we have that, and the reason I bring that up is because we don't have anything else. I mean, where's the ecstasy? Where's the opioids? Right? I mean, we're not a big injecting population anyway, but India was very needle adverse. Indians from India, right? And all of a sudden, opium like mad in India now and injecting. What's the difference? The difference literally is we have high quality cannabis, we have high quality cocaine, and there's absolutely no reason to look for any other substances. And if you go any place else in the world where these other new psychoactive substances, these chemicals that they're putting together to get people high, and you look at those, and what you see is massive interdictions of the plant-based substances, cocaine, cannabis, and then substitute it with these chemicals that are way more harmful. I mean, we hear about fentanyl now all the time as a synthetic opioid that is so strong that people are injecting it and they're dying. Part of the problems with the criminality, with the prohibition, is with the illicit substances that are adulterated. And even here, in what we're trying to do with cannabis here, is if we make it a regulated substance and we control the pesticides, the gramazone, right? Some people are spraying gramazone by their cannabis, and they're not, and it's not good. It's just not good, right? So there's all kinds of adulterants even in the cannabis industry, and there's also the genetic modification of cannabis to make the THC stronger than the other cannabinoids, which takes the plant out of balance, and I believe causes this high THC weed causes more mental health issues because it's not balanced with the other cannabinoids that are built into the plant. So, I mean, in a way, we're lucky that we only have these two substances. And when I go international and have participated, I mean, I was St. Lucia's representative on the Commission on Narcotics Drugs for 10 years, and the kind of problems that people are having around the world with synthetic substances. And people say, what about you? And I would say, well, we have cocaine and cannabis. That's all we have. And it took me a long time to realize that was actually a protective factor for us, which seems very strange to say, but really was.
One of the things I see as well is with cannabis, there's a lot of resistance to cannabis becoming legal because of the COPD that some persons say it causes. And I don't know that cannabis itself causes COPD. I know that when you smoke it for long periods of time, especially if you mix it with cigarettes, it can predispose you to COPD. I'm sure if we have that conversation with Priest Kailash, he'll agree, because he says he believes that smoking is what brings on the COPD. I think there's some research around that as well. Whereas using the bong where it filters through the water and so on, it has a better delivery of the cannabis to the system, so you get a more desirable effect than smoking it. So smoking cannabis is what I know that causes all of the major health issues that arise from cannabis use.
What about using it as a tea?
As a tea as well, can assist, but again, it would depend on the strain and all of that, because the teas tend to give a much higher or faster result than the smoking. I guess it's a way that, because if you'll ask persons as well, if you eat a brownie with cannabis compared to smoking, they'll tell you that the brownie has a higher, a more potent effect, and that's because of the delivery system that it uses.
A couple of messages. I think, I have no facts, but I think that anytime we hear about somebody going to the hospital from eating an edible, inevitably they've been at a party, and inevitably they've been drinking first, right? If you mix alcohol before you use cannabis, it magnifies to the point where you get very drunk, basically, right? In fact, one of the things that we talk about with alcohol is if you want to reduce your alcohol consumption when you go out for the evening, smoke a joint first, because then you won't drink as much alcohol, because the alcohol will have a greater effect on you. If you reverse that process, though, then you get really messed up. So I think that the other thing I would say, and I think that's to me, it's like heart attacks, right? You read about heart attacks and cocaine, but inevitably cocaine and alcohol is really what's contributing to the cocaethylene that builds up from the cocaine and the alcohol causes heart attacks. And so it's not just the cocaine, right? And we leave the alcohol most of the time when we talk about drug-induced death from heart attacks and cocaine. We leave out the alcohol aspect of it because it's a legal substance, and we don't want to make the people at the brewery feel bad, you know.
Yeah, and just to put in a word there, what that is called is cross-feeding. So somebody who uses either cannabis and alcohol at the same time, both of them are nervous system depressants, so it can actually increase the depressant effect of both. As well with the alcohol and cocaine, which with the cocaethylene effect on the heart. So that kind of cross-feeding is can be dangerous for the individual who uses those two substances together. And I agree with you. Most persons who do end up in ER from cross-feeding, especially with the cannabis, it's not just cannabis or brownie that they would have used. They probably would have had a drink before, and that would have caused the disinhibition that would have resulted in them using the brownie, and the result of the two together would have caused them to end up in ER.
Not to mention a number of people who I know who seroconverted into HIV. The incident that actually infected them was associated with drug use. So again, the same disinhibition, and then leads to risky sexual behavior. You're not paying attention, and the next thing you know, you become infected with HIV or hepatitis C.
Yeah.
Or other STIs, actually.
Okay, don't forget we need to open up our lines whenever you're ready.
Yes, we are.
Okay, let me just give the numbers if you'd like to call in. This is Mind Matters with Dr. Julius Gilead. The fixed line is 572-9710, 572-9710, or you can WhatsApp 287-0971. WhatsApp is 287-0971. So again, the fixed line 572-9710, or the WhatsApp platform 287-0971. Mind Matters with Dr. Julius Gilead.
Yes, so like I was saying earlier, one of the things I find is lacking is research, especially in St. Lucia, around the causes of substance use and even the effects as well. I know the ministry does put together data from the different wellness centers on the persons who come in with different disorders, but I don't, that's just data. So we need more than just data. We need research on what reason the person uses. So somebody comes in and says, I use marijuana, or I use alcohol, or I smoke tobacco, or I use cocaine. What do you get from it? How does it affect the way that you show up in the world? And what happens when or if you try to stop, how many times have you tried to stop? All of those other factors that would better inform us as to how we can approach the population around substance use.
You know, we were talking about COPD. Dr. Joanna Charles, she was a casualty, and she was tracking COPD intake. And one of the things that she found that was interesting to her was that tobacco smokers would present at 60, 65, 70 years old with COPD after a lifetime of smoking tobacco. But that people who smoked cannabis mixed with tobacco were presenting at 30 and 35 years old, and hooked up to oxygen. I mean, so bad. And so she started to investigate this. And I think, from my feeling, is if you think about how people draw in the smoke, right? So if you're smoking a cigarette, you're puffing. You're not really pulling anything, right? But if you're pulling on a cannabis cigarette, you're pulling all that smoke in, and you're holding it in. So when you mix tobacco with cannabis, right, especially cigarette tobacco, which is basically an adulterated poison anyway, that you're pulling that in and you're holding it deep into your lungs, which you normally wouldn't do if you were just smoking a cigarette. And again, another simple harm, you shouldn't smoke tobacco, but a simple harm reduction strategy is smoke your cigarette and smoke your joint separate. Don't mix them, as an example, right? And there's actually good science that was done in out at UCLA looking at how cannabis actually mitigates COPD issues from tobacco use when used separately. But apparently mixed together, again, the synergy of it causes more problems.
And what's the reason for the drawing of the cannabis? Why is that being done?
When you inhale something, you bypass your liver to have it come directly into your blood, right? So inhaling, snorting, these are putting stuff under your tongue, right? If your doctor tells you to put a drop under your tongue, he's not telling you for any other reason that he wants it to go directly into your blood system rather than pass through your cannabis, through your liver or through your kidneys, right, to be metabolized. And so that basically it's a delivery system. It's inhalation therapy is actually the way they're now talking about it in terms of medical cannabis. That if you want to deliver the cannabis as quickly as possible to your system, drawing it in through your lungs is the fastest. Whereas if you eat it, it takes maybe 45 minutes for it to take effect, but it's a longer effect and is also a more intense, a deeper effect.
Yeah, not just that. If you look at medically, prolonged inhalation causes increased heart rate and increased blood pressure as well. So when somebody inhales deeply, the heart pumps quicker, so then it gets to the brain quicker. Yeah.
Let me just remind our listeners that the lines are open. The fixed line is 572-9710, 572-9710. WhatsApp is 287-0971. WhatsApp is 287-0971. You're listening to and viewing Mind Matters with Dr. Julius Gilead.
So Dr. Day, just one question. From a policy perspective, what do you think can be done to deal with all the stigma that we have around the different substances in St. Lucia?
You know, during COVID, PAHO contracted me to look at how we would do...
Sorry to disturb you, Dr. Day. We have a call.
Oh, good.
Okay, we'll come back to your point.
Yes. Good morning, caller. Welcome to Mind Matters.
Hi, good morning.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
My question is, at one point, you have a family member who drinks alcohol. At what point should you be worried about this person? Are they becoming an alcoholic?
Okay, so like I said earlier on...
Thank you, caller.
Thank you for the question. So as I said earlier on, any substance use disorder becomes disordered when the person starts to spend more time using substances than not using the substance. So that person spends more time using than not using, so then the person's responsibilities become affected. The person maybe stops going to work, the person starts neglecting the family and friends because they're spending so much time using or recovering from the substance. So if it's somebody uses alcohol, so they may have started taking one drink a day, and then they go up to 5 or 6, and then
or if you're hiding it, if you're keeping your substance use, your alcohol use secret, then that's because we're only as sick as our secrets.
Yes.
We have another call.
Hello,
good morning,
day.
caller. Welcome. Thanks for calling.
Hi. Yeah, how are you?
Okay, you as well.
I'm good.
Okay.
My question is, what is the difference between smoking the marijuana and drinking it as a tea? What effects you get in drinking it, and what effects you get in smoking it?
Okay, so like
I'll listen. No.
Yes, no
Thank
problem.
you.
Like we were saying earlier on, it's a different delivery system. So the using or drinking the alcohol, it would go to the stomach, and from there it would go through the liver, where it would be metabolized somewhat, and so it would change the way that it's delivered to the brain. When you smoke it, there is some that bypasses the liver and some that does go through the liver, but the smoking actually does reduce the amount of cannabis that is actually in the blood, and you have more going up straight to the brain because the brain is so close to the lungs and the throat and the nasal cavity and so on. So you do have some being directly delivered or delivered directly to the blood circulation near the brain.
You have another call?
But I think tea won't make you high like smoking will make you high. And you can take green leaves and make tea out of it, and it would be very it would be good for you, and it would not cause you any psychoactive interactions that would from smoke.
You have another call.
Good morning, caller. Welcome. Thanks for calling.
Good morning, Andre. Good morning to St. Lucia.
Good morning.
Andre, my
Welcome.
deepest sympathy goes out to you and the family.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Andre. Yes, Andre. Question to the doctor. I know a lot of people in St. Lucia actually mixing the drugs, and after mixing the drugs, they still using the alcohol, right? And what they really, I want to find out from the doctor what they're really looking for by doing those two things together, because to me, it is only one high you can get by using a marijuana or using the alcohol. There's only one high you could get, and searching for using maybe 20 sticks of marijuana, you could never get the same high that you first got when you take the first draw. So the problem I am seeing today, there is a lot of people that's searching for a high that they could never get, even when they smoke 20 sticks of marijuana. So the biggest problem I'm seeing we have today is that people don't know when to stop. So we have a lot of addicts that is just walking around, smoking and drinking. We have a lot of addicts, and sometimes people need to realize one is too many, and 1,000 will never be enough.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that is one of the myths around substance use, that people don't know when to stop. Yes?
Well, I don't think it's a myth. I think what happens is you have a small posse of people who will never be high enough, and eventually, thank God we're not in an opioid situation, but this is, if you follow news overseas where people are dying from opioid overdoses, it's because they're chasing that high. They're chasing that ultimately never. For some people, and obviously the last caller was a 12-stepper, because you got that 1,000, and one is too many and 1,000 is never enough, right? Which is a very good saying for somebody who uses so compulsively that if they just, think about tobacco. I don't know if you ever smoke cigarettes, but I used to smoke cigarettes, and I know enough to have sense to not have another nicotine, because nicotine is amazingly addictive. Just incredible how many people get off everything and they got a trach tube in their neck and they're sucking tobaccos with a trach tube because they just have to have it. So, everybody is different, and when you run into people who never get high enough, you just have to...
Yeah, we also have to look at the brain. So substance use does change the way that the brain works. And if you have to look at one of the substances in the brain, one of the chemicals, that's dopamine. So the substance use does increase dopamine significantly in the brain, so the dopamine supply. So that's what causes the high and the high energy and so on, and the euphoria. Now, after the brain goes through a period of excessive dopamine, the brain itself has to increase or change its architecture, increase what we call the dopamine receptors on the different axons or the different nerve cells in order to accommodate the increased dopamine. So those increased receptors are what causes the withdrawal symptoms when the person tries to stop using. So when the person tries to stop using, the brain's like, hey, why isn't there dopamine anymore? And it starts to act up, and then the person gets those withdrawal symptoms that are relieved when they use. And even for persons who have to drink first thing in the morning, that's what happens. So when they wake up in the morning, there's no alcohol in the system, because alcohol goes through the system in about 3.5 hours. And so the brain is wondering, hey, what's going on there? Go take a drink. And so the person takes a drink and feels immediately better. And so they can't go through their day. Yes? So it's not just about somebody having control over their use. It's about how the brain has changed and the person has to stay off the substance for a significant time for the brain to reaccommodate the low dopamine levels that would have been caused from not using after the prolonged use.
So the brain, as you said, changes because of the use of the...
Yes.
Okay. We have another call.
Okay. Good morning, caller.
Hi, good morning.
Hello.
This is Dr. Eve Felician, psychiatrist as well.
Nice to hear from you, Dr. Felician.
Nice to hear from you, Dr. Gillard. I just wanted to kind of make a comment when it comes to use of cannabis. And yes, Dr. Day is right. And sometimes for some people, it can cause a calming effect. But Dr. Julius said something that is very important, that when you have the use of dopamine and you go through your withdrawals, what happens in the withdrawals is that the client will get the opposite effect. And then this is where your question, Andre, would be answered. Why do you want more? Because if you have an opposite effect from being calm, then you want to get back to be calm again. And this is where you get to use the drugs over and over. So just that the callers understand that yes, when you use a drug that calms you, for example, alcohol, it has a calming effect, a depressant effect. Then when the drug is cleared out of the system, you have the opposite effect. So that is how somebody can become addicted, because they always want to get the effect that they want, which is not what they get after the withdrawal. Okay. And that was a very interesting program. Thank you so much.
Thanks for
Thank
calling.
you for calling. Thank you.
We should give CMEs.
Do you know the caller, Dr.
Yes,
Gillian?
I know her. She worked as a psychiatrist in St. Lucia for a few years whilst I was out.
Oh. So, is it better then to not start this thing?
Yes.
Because you're saying that it changes the brain,
Yes.
and the brain now sounds like it's almost like controlling you.
Yes, exactly.
And telling you, go get the stuff and make me feel good.
Exactly.
But trauma changes your brain too.
Yes, exactly. So trauma changes your brain, and trauma usually occurs in childhood. And then if you start using any substance, especially in childhood or teenage years, your brain has not yet fully developed. So in those sensitive periods, the substances have a greater effect on the architecture of the brain than it would have had if you started using in your late 20s or 30s and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm sure Dr. Day will agree is that persons who started using substances earlier are more likely to become disordered users than persons who started using later on in life.
Can you repeat that?
Yes, persons who start using substances earlier in life, especially childhood and adolescence, are more likely to become disordered users than persons who start using substances in the adult years.
And why is that?
That is because the brain has not completely completed its development in the teenage years.
Oh.
So then remember we spoke before about synaptic pruning and so on. So the pathways that the brain realizes is using most, if it is to use substances, those pathways are what remain after the pruning. So then the person then becomes more focused on using because that's a habit that they developed. And especially the brain architecture has changed and so on. And it's a lot more difficult to get off the substances if they start using in teenage years than if they start using in the adult years. Now everybody is different, like I said. And what I'm talking about is risk, and not that this definitely will happen, but then the risk is there, and it's increased if you start using earlier.
You know, this is something that I continue to struggle with in terms of what's going on. And the only thing I could say is that if you go to any classroom, no matter what, and you ask kids, where can you buy weed? Where can you buy marijuana? And you'll see everybody raise their hands, right? 95%. And one little white kid probably wouldn't know. And then you say, then you think about who uses, right? Because obviously it's everywhere. So anybody who wants cannabis can get cannabis. So who gravitates to using it, especially at a younger age, a teenage age, that kind of thing. And so you start to look at the people who don't, who don't have that kind of trauma motivation, as opposed to the young people who do and have that. And this is, to me, one of the things that I think is really important, is to have that kind of screening at the community level to find these people before they get so deep into this, and see how we can deal with the trauma without them self-medicating with substances, or even, as we pass the new laws, medicating under the supervision of a psychiatrist, of a physician, so that we can monitor what's going on with them. And I think that to me, if you see young people using at an early age, there's another thing going on there. It isn't that they're just going to look to get high. Mm-hmm. They're looking to medicate themselves because of some pain that they've been subjected to.
Let's take a final call.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, caller. Welcome.
Good morning.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Hi.
It's just a question I have, but that thing happened a long time ago, maybe over more than 15 years ago. It was, my dad was an alcoholic, and he was sick. He was ill at the time. And then he asked me to give him alcohol. And then I was really mad at him, and I was saying to him, alcohol isn't medication. You're sick and you want alcohol. So do you think that I should have given him the alcohol? Because he was really craving for it. But imagine that he died that same day. He died that same night. He asked for the alcohol. I was mad at him. I wouldn't dare give him alcohol, but he's dead a long time. And then the following day, we found him dead. So some people are saying, but you should have given them the alcohol. Maybe that would make him feel better. Would that make him feel better?
It's a good question.
Mm-hmm. I often muse how many men in particular die in casualty, who die in the hospital because they go through withdrawals from alcohol. They can't get alcohol while they're in the hospital, and their hospital is treating whatever issue, the broken bone or whatever physical problem brought them there, and they're deprived of their alcohol, and it leads to complications. And fascinating that in the same study I was doing during COVID for looking at how to isolate people who use drugs in terms of quarantine. We tried to investigate this, and we ran into a big roadblock with the hospital and with the physicians, because nobody wants to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. So it's not just talk about it, but the policy of the hospital, especially the medical body, has its treatment regime, and they try to be as evidence-based as possible. And if the evidence says alcohol it cannot be given once you taking another drug or whatever, then giving the person alcohol can lead to problems for the hospital and for the treating physician. So we have to be very careful. Yes, we don't want the person to withdraw and die. However, the treatment regime or the policy and so on does not allow for alcohol to be given, especially in a hospital setting. Yeah.
Before we end, because we have to end right now, I have a very important question. As Dr. Day said earlier, that the government may soon be passing legislation to either legalize or decriminalize, whatever we call it. I just want to know, will there be benefits to the population, right? Let's just forget about government collecting taxes and so on, right? What benefits can we expect? Or the opposite of that, what negative impacts can we expect from freeing up the herb, as they say?
Cannabis is medicine, and if we regulate it and we control it and we dispense it the way we do other medications, then I think that there would be a benefit for people. I think that a regulated environment would remove a lot of the adulterants, a lot of the other problems, and I think there's a number of people who would turn to cannabis for medication, and they don't now because of the illegality of it. And so we bring it into sunlight, and we can control it and dispense it from physicians, from psychiatrists. Then I think that it would be much better situation.
But explain to me, Dr. Day, how can it be a medicine if we're hearing Dr. Gilead saying it affects the brain, changes the brain, things like that? How could that be?
So just let me add to what he says there. So you have to be very careful with that question as well. Because the the more serious effects are seen in the vulnerable populations. So the children and adolescents who are at risk of continuing to use and maybe even later on in life transiting to other more illicit substances. So what he's speaking about is the medicinal effect for persons who do need it. And if it is a controlled drug which is dispensed by a doctor, so somebody would have to go to a doctor with certain medical issues that the cannabis would benefit them, or the cannabinoids would benefit them, and that person would be prescribed that as medicine. But the
so you're saying
indiscriminate use of cannabis, I don't think that's what we are aiming for. The indiscriminate use may cause us more problems in the long term, especially if we see younger persons gravitating towards using cannabis. And it's something we're going to probably touch on another show, that issue of addiction with social media and phones and so on, which has been shown to actually cause a lot of the anxiety and depression in young people that actually lead them towards using substances of abuse. So it's something we're going to touch on at another show later on the line. So thank you, Dr. Day, for coming today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Today we learned that drug use and mental health are deeply connected, and that people often turn to substances to cope with pain, but that drug use can also worsen or trigger mental health struggles. We must break stigma, and that is important. That's why this show is running. We must challenge myths, and we must offer real support to persons who are struggling. Remember, if you do have a disorder, recovery is possible. So help is available, I think, at Turning Point, or through other agencies in St. Lucia. So thank you, Dr. Day, for your expertise. I really appreciated your input today, and join us next week for another episode of Mind Matters.
Same time.
Next week we're having Dr. Miss Francisca Plummer from the Safford Lewis Community College on, and we'll be speaking about parenting.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
I see you got excited.
And Dr. Day, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, my sympathies.
Thank you. Thank you. So this has been Mind Matters with Dr. Julius Gilliard. Listen again and view again next week, Wednesday, same time from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. for another Mind Matters, brought to you the compliments of Lab Services.
Knowing is the first step. Knowing is confidence. It's a compass guiding you towards medical answers. At Laboratory Services and Consultations Limited, we are in the business of knowing. Knowing where to look and what to look for. And this knowledge guides you and your health provider to your medical answers. We are the focus, precise, and confidential heart of healthcare. The invisible thread binding together all those committed to your well-being. Laboratory Services and Consultations Limited. We focus on results so you can focus on what's important. Need us? Call us. Telephone 459-2200 or visit any of our 10 locations island-wide.
From September 10th, Rev-Up St. Lucia 95.9 FM presents a brand new program that puts your mental well-being first.